Welcome to Joe's Astrology. Saturn versus Uranus. So I want to have just a little discussion with myself here, and hopefully many of you viewers in YouTube will watch this. And I want to discuss the difference between Saturn and Uranus because this is a major thing that is happening in the world, in our world, in any of our lives. This difference between Saturn and Uranus, and this could be an extremely long video, a very much in-depth video. Let's just take a look at what Saturn is. Saturn is time, and Saturn is limitation. Saturn is constriction. But what I want to focus on is Saturn as conformity. The archetype of Saturn is to conform. The expression of life for most people is to conform. Uranus, on the other hand, is liberation, rebelliousness, anarchy, individuality. So Saturn wants to conform. Uranus wants to liberate from that conformity. Uranus wants to express itself, wants to be an individual. Liberate from conditioning. So because Saturn is conformity, and most of us are wired to conform, in many cases we have to conform. When a person is being affected by Uranus, or let's say has a strong Uranus in their chart, they are liberating from the conditioning that Saturn, by the nature of conformity, they're liberating from the conditioning that conformity is causing. So when you come into this world, for example, you're forced to conform. Many of us just conform unconsciously, and that conditions us to be a certain way. And then one day we get a little older, or we wake up from this trance of conformity, and we realize that we have been conditioned. We have been conditioned to be the way we are. We've been conditioned to live our lives a certain way. And with Uranus, we begin to break free from that. Uranus is also breaking free, freedom. And what often happens is, unfortunately, is we'll see rebelliousness. And this is where I think this is a major problem that I'm going to get into. And it makes it very difficult for the Uranian impulse and the Uranian energy to ever completely take over. I'm assuming that that's by design from the creator. So let's say, for example, you have somebody, you just take an individual in one lifetime. They are becoming teenagers and they're beginning to assert their individuality. And for the most part, you may say that everyone goes through this, but I would argue that the majority does not take it to the degree that a true Uranian person does. So there is that rebelliousness that everyone might go through a little bit, but then there's the true rebellion. And we see people that are breaking free, and a couple examples of people breaking free from the conformity is religion. They're beginning to see that the religion has conditioned them in a way that they now they don't like. And what they'll do is they'll go completely against religion. And of course, well, from my perspective, there are a lot of half-truths in religion. There are many truths and positive things that come out of religion, but these people, what they'll do is they'll go completely the other way and they'll become an atheist. And it'll be all anti-God, anti-religion. They absolutely will hate the church. They'll hate religion. They can be very miserable people to be around. And that's kind of with it's kind of a Uranian energy that also has some Saturn to it. Um, but I'm not going to get too deep with that. I just want to mention that's one example that can happen. Another example could be we see people who are um, ostracized from society, and that's another key word for Aquarius or Uranus, being ostracized, and they'll tattoo themselves to the extreme. They might do extreme. They might partake in extreme activity, and I'm not saying that these things are bad or that you shouldn't do those. Like tattoos are inherently bad. I'm talking about in the cases where a person uses that as a way to express the fact that they're not conforming anymore. So, for example, majority of people will say don't really, more likely than not, don't have tattoos, even though it's getting more popular. They will get tattoos just to, um, as an expression of that liberation from the conditioning. And that's really what I'm getting at here is when a person begins to do something uh, only as an expression of that liberation from their conditioning. And then as time goes on, or life or different lives, you can see the expression of the liberation from conditioning in very positive ways, where a person might start to think. They might start to think differently. They might start to accept ideas, accept other people's ideas, and learn from them, and learn from the relativity of it all, and not get trapped into the absolutes. Because their conditioning says that they should be absolutely Muslim or absolutely Christian, and they're breaking away from that and seeing that that's not really healthy. That's not balanced. That might not even be the truth, the highest truth here on planet Earth. But I definitely wanted to distinguish between those two things, because oftentimes we're seeing, and this is where a problem. The problem of this is I was saying that I don't think that it's going to be difficult for everyone, or I don't think that everyone will ever liberate from their conditioning at the same time. Because as you see, even when this occurs, when it first occurs, you see people in the majority using their anarchy, using their freedom, using their rebelliousness just to show that they're not conforming, not as opposed to higher thinking as this is more positive, this is a more intelligent route to go. And it's kind of a step into that next direction to go fully into a more positive Uranian energy, like for example, objective awareness, seeing things objectively versus subjectively. Oftentimes, when with the Saturnian energy, everyone is conforming, it's very subjective. It's very about me, very much about me, and not looking at the bigger picture. And objectively, is this right? Is this good? Etc. And anarchy, when I say anarchy, I mean no masters and no rulers. So the Aquarian person, think of individuality, wants to be fully an individual, take care of himself or herself, um, wants to think. You think of Mercury is also exalted in Aquarius, and genius is known as the genius planet is known as Uranus. So this person wants to think for themselves and figure things out for themselves. They want to think things through. They want to decide on their own. Is this something that they want to do? Where the conformist is just doing what they're told. And think of, as we grow up, most of us are just doing what we're told. No conscience. And another great example of maybe liberating from conditioning where that can kind of go wrong is you see like-minded groups that's also Aquarius. And tribes, communities. So you see people, they come together, they say, yeah, we can have our own thing. We don't have to conform to that anymore. But then in reality, what they fall prey to is conforming to this new thing, conforming to this new group. And you see that with examples of what they would call cults in the news. You'll hear like these groups of people, and I wouldn't call them cults. They're not cults, but they're like-minded groups trying to establish their own society, their own community. And you see that it starts to kind of go backwards and become Saturnian, because of course Saturn has to be involved in all of this, and it's just the way it is. Very difficult to be completely in a Uranian energy. I mean, that's where you might see mental illness or something like that, which I can get in. I'm not going to get into in this video. But yeah, this idea of these cults that pop up, and even spiritual teachers that start to tap into this energy and they're just kind of coming out of the consensus and they become spiritual teachers. Group hysteria. So what they don't realize that they're falling back into conformity again. They're just conforming to something else. But because they decided, or they think they decided, to them that's liberation from their conditioning. Saturn versus Uranus. Let's take a look at Saturn a little bit more. Saturn is also Capricorn, the 10th house. Boundaries, structures, nationalism. We see this with countries. Countries are essentially Saturnian for the most part. There's obviously it's not 100%. Like I said, Saturn exists in everything. Uranus exists in everything. It's a blend. It's a mix. We're made up of these energies. But countries are essentially Saturnian. They have boundaries. They have laws. And that's another thing I can mention, that the idea of breaking laws. Oftentimes we see criminals and they're just repeat offenders. And there could be many reasons for this, but one of the reasons could be that they are breaking free from their conditioning. Their life is if it ends up being like that, their life is a testament, is an example. As a basis for their life, they want to be anti-conformist, and they don't care if that means committing crimes, because committing crimes is going against the law. Arguably, in their mind, laws are made, not made up. They can kind of twist the law and make it work for them, etc. Like, for example, doing drugs. A person might be doing drugs, and that's non-conformity, because they're thinking, well, I'm not hurting anyone, and I don't think this is bad for me. This is good for me. Smoking marijuana is good for me. I've decided that. I didn't say that, but other people, that's the way they're thinking, and they are going to do it regardless of what the law says. And some people might break the law just because. Oftentimes, you could see with like thieves, petty thieves, etc. You might ask them, "Why did you do it? What's the benefit of this? It's just a couple dollars, etc." You could have even asked for this, and they have no reason for it. So Uranus as breaking the law, committing crimes, because remember, laws are man-made. The laws that we have in the books, they are not necessarily all natural laws. Some of them might incorporate natural laws. There's much more that can be said about this. I'm going to leave it there for now. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this content. And I do offer astrology readings if anyone out there is interested. And I hope this finds you well. And good luck on your journey to liberate from your conditioning.